So we're going to Jaylen Walker. I have him at 4, but you have him as edge 2. Why is he number 2 for you?
Yeah, I really like him for a couple of reasons. Well, several reasons. So number one, forget the hybrid stuff. He was a true hybrid deployment at Georgia. They had him as off the ball linebacker. They had him as a true pass rusher, and they would move him between the two. It wasn't one of these situations where we've seen previously where you're like, for the first 2 downs, you play off the ball linebacker, and then third down, you kick down, you rush the passer. They were like moving him around pre-snap, and it would change what the front looked like. Like they were using him effectively as the chess piece that would change what the defensive front looked like. And they were moving him off the ball, or then they would walk him down and add him to the rush. They would stand him up and move him back, and suddenly the number of down linemen changes. So they used him as like a genuine hybrid player, the likes of which doesn't really exist in the NFL. There's a similar conversation you could have for Jaylen Walker to the one people have with Travis Hunter, right? And instead of both ways, like how much of this hybrid, this two-way thing can we use? It's like for Jaylen Walker, what could we use him to do on a defense? I don't think people are going to do that, generally speaking. And somebody made this point on Twitter the other day. Like, look at the teams that are picking in the top 10 and tell me which defensive coordinator you think is creative enough to do that and make it work. The answer is they're not, right? So basically throw that out as like a theoretical potential, case study story, and just say, I'm moving him to the edge. I'm making him a full-time edge rusher, 6'2", 245 pounds. It's undersized, but it's like within the margins of elite players, right? Von Miller is a few pounds heavier and an inch taller. Robert Mathis was almost the same exact size and was an absolute force as a defensive end in a 4-3 back in the day. Like Hassan Reddick is a very similar size. Like his size is fine to me. And one of the reasons it's fine is look at the tape and show me where it's a problem, right? He turns an exceptionally tight arc. That thing we talked about with Abdul Carter, I think Walker does it even better. And he does it inside as well. Like he's able to turn a corner even against guards and run this like insanely tight direction hoop to get in on the quarterback. I think his power is actually really good for 245 pounds. He does not get bulldozed by offensive linemen that are 100 pounds heavier than he is. He's got a pretty sick long arm for a guy who doesn't have long arms. His arms, I think, are 32 inches, which is, not particularly long for an edge rusher, but he's got a long arm move that works. His hand use is good, particularly for a guy that's got such little playing experience at any position, forget edge, playing experience, period. There's a really nice sort of fluidity to his movement. He just glides around the place, almost to the point where even when he's making hard cuts, it doesn't seem like sudden. It doesn't seem jerky. And I almost think that somehow is deceptive, because there's a lot of guys that just miss him when they don't, like he just glides by them and they're like, wait, what? How did he get over there? And then like a couple of small things that nobody ever talks about, but one of them is one of the reasons that I've got another guy I'm a lot lower. He's one of the best tacklers in this draft. Forget edge rusher, like all positions. He is one of the most fundamentally, technically sound tacklers in this entire draft. And that is going to get him a lot of plays. There are a lot of plays where he latches on, puts shoulder into thigh pad and brings a guy down with wrap tackle technique. Like he's going to get a lot of plays that other guys don't make because he finishes them.
Yeah, there's a lot to like about Jaylen Walker. I think a lot of the discussion around him is almost like what maybe Abdul Carter a year ago. I mean, so my hesitancy on Jaylen Walker is, as a data guy, Sam, is the lack of sample size. And
right.
and when you're projected, there's certain positions, maybe corner, where I don't think production matters as much, and there are other parts that are projectable. Edge just has this history of the biggest slam dunks are guys who did it and were productive and guys who are athletic. And you just combine those two things on the edge and you're going to improve your hit rate dramatically. It's just the way it is. And Walker just hasn't done it a ton. You mentioned which teams are, could use him as a hybrid. First off, I'm not saying, I don't think Jaylen Walker is a slam dunk top 10 player. You have him high. Renner has him high. Dan Brugler has him high. But I also feel like people are also going to look at the way I have looked at him and said, there's some projection there. Maybe he's undersized for certain teams still who might want a 255 plus pounder on the edge. He could fall into the teens, so there are some schemes where I would love to place him. I would love to place him in Raheem Morris's scheme in Atlanta, where they are going to do a little bit more dropping into coverage. Morris comes from the Rams, where they were doing that a ton, as we know, with Michael Hoyt, who dropped 40 pounds to be able to do that. So there are some systems where it would be cool to see. But to your point, I don't know if we'll have the opportunity to get there. Brian Flores, of course, the other guy that comes to mind, right? So when you look at it, Andrew Van Ginkel, who had played well in Miami under Brian Flores, played well in Minnesota under Brian Flores at 235, 240 pounds, with that athleticism off the edge and the ability to drop into coverage and rush the passer. Jaylen Walker can do all of that. So I don't know that he'll be a scheme fit for everyone. There's still enough defensive coordinators around the NFL who say, yeah, that's still kind of a 3-4 outside backer. For us, we still like a bigger edge rusher. So I don't know what happens to him from where he lands on draft night perspective. But yeah, I love his just natural feel and athleticism for the game. But my hesitancy on Jaylen Walker is, if you thought he was just a traditional linebacker, which I don't think most of the NFL would, he's inexperienced and not great at that. If you think he's just an edge rusher, he's inexperienced at that. He's got less than 1,000 snaps, under 1,000 snaps in his career, playing a hybrid role, which means, he's only rushed the passer 300 something times. And when you're projecting a guy to the NFL, I would rather see 600 snaps of uber high production for a guy that I'm drafting in the top 10. So that's where I think Jaylen Walker's below from an on-field perspective, guys like James Pierce or Mike Green. Even with Mike Green's competition questions, there's just a little more risk associated on the field with Jaylen Walker and projecting him to the next level. Hey guys, just taking a quick break to tell you, hey, just over 50% of you are still unsubscribed to Check the Mic. It helps the channel. It helps to make sure that you don't miss any of our shows. So if you have a chance, hit the subscribe button right now.
Yeah, I mean, we've said this before, right? Like all of the guys, once you get beyond Abdul Carter, and even Carter has low sample size in terms of it's been one season, but once you get beyond Carter, there is a red flag of some description to all of the rest of the guys. And the question becomes, so if you're a team that wants a pass rusher and, number 8, say, or, one of these other teams, you're like, well, which is the least scary red flag? Which is the thing we don't care about? Because I think that will differ for every team. Not everyone's going to have the same thing that scares them. Some teams will probably see a low sample size thing as a positive, right? That idea of like, if you give me 2 guys that run the same time to first base, do you want the guy with perfect form or the guy with crappy form? Well, you take the guy with crappy form, because once you give him the good form, he's faster, right? I think some teams are going to see the low sample size thing as a positive. Like, he's barely played and he's this good. Like, give me that. And we can, the upside, the potential, the stuff we were talking about with Abdul Carter, once you add all these moves to his, like, think what it'll be. You and I have been doing this long enough that we also know there's a downside to that, right? That the low sample size thing can be a problem or a risk as much as an upside and a potential play. But I don't think that that's an opinion shared by every team in the NFL. So if you're one of those, you might not give a crap about the low sample size thing. You're like, give me that guy. I've seen all I need to see, right? And then similar, there'll be other teams that like, okay, we'll take the gamble on character or work ethic or whatever. And other teams are like, get that guy off the board immediately, right? So I think once you get beyond Abdul Carter, each one of these guys has here's the positive, and then we got one problem over here that you need to decide whether you care about it or not. For Jaylen Walker, I think we just haven't seen that much of it. I think what we have seen is really good, but it is a very low sample size.
Yeah, the other thing I just want to reiterate, which we've talked about with Jaylen Walker quite a bit on the show, but as we're just profiling him specifically, I absolutely love what you said, his ability to tackle and his ability to get off blocks, not when he wins the rushes, right? And going back to more quarterbacks leaving the pocket, gap control may be more important than ever. I've explained historically when we were grading at PFF, we really focused from a grading standpoint on one-on-one wins. I still believe that's the most important thing, is beating the guy in front of you one-on-one. The more often you do that, the sacks will get there. You're creating disruption. That is the most valuable thing you can do as a pass rusher. However, when you lose right? When you lose the one-on-one, the ability to get off the block or to adjust your rush or to just stop the scrambling quarterback by having good gap control. I think Jaylen Walker is exceptional at that. The play I highlighted the other day, the play going around where Kelvin Banks from Texas blocks Jaylen Walker about 11 yards deep. It's not a loss for Kelvin Banks, but Walker adjusts his rush to pick up the sack. Those plays, I think, are more valuable than ever in today's NFL. So I think that combination, plus this might be too specific, using him in a spy role, which he was fantastic at Georgia, from a week-to-week game plan perspective. The fact that he does have the off-ball linebacker experience, you can move him around, you can use him as a spy, you can move him to the edge. That does add a little bit. Even if you don't have schemes that are going to do this all the time and drop him into coverage 150 times a year, that's fine. He does have this added skill set that even if he doesn't dominate one-on-one, I think he's adding a ton of value off the edge as well.
Yeah, I wrote in my notes that he's a cleanup machine and in a good way, right? Like not one of these guys who's a cleanup machine and that's the only production they get. Like he's a cleanup machine in addition to being a productive pass rusher in his own right, but like he's incredibly good at chasing down broken plays, at reacting to broken plays, like whether it's as a defensive lineman or as an off the ball linebacker. I think he sifts through trash at the line of scrimmage extremely well. Like he's able to keep his eyes on the ball or the quarterback and like instinctively move past stuff in his way without having to focus on it. Like that, almost the reverse of, quarterbacks that navigate the pocket. And it's like, well, do they drop their eyes to do it, or are they able to do it without focusing on it, right? Are they able to do it whilst keeping their eyes downfield? Are they able to maneuver around the pocket and get away from all the trash and just do it almost instinctively, like using your periphery? Defense is the same thing, right? Are you able to get through all that crap without looking at it, or do you have to like navigate all the stuff and then put your eyes back on chasing the quarterback? Like he's able to get through obstructions without having to focus on it and just does it instinctively. Like there's a play I tweeted out there where he just like shucks off the block of a running back like it's not even there, and he never like looks at it. He's just like eyes on the quarterback the whole way. Running back comes to pick up the blitz, he just like tosses him to the side, all while focusing over here. Like the running back never even registers on his attention other than just like instinctively tossing him to the side and carrying on going.
All right, man. And just to wrap it up on Jaylen Walker, just fascinating prospect. I have been starry-eyed, say, with the versatile guys in the past, the Isaiah Simmons of the world, guys who could do multiple things. I do think that makes Jaylen Walker a wild card in this draft. Just an interesting player to see how the league values him, how they use him, and just what he and the part of there's just not a big sample, and seeing how well teams are able to project him.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.